Hi and welcome back to another Scraps and Ink video. You remember the snowman that I made in the last video? And today I'm going to make a card using this picture. And I'm going to just fussy cut him. I don't have any dies, any coordinating dies with this set, so I ended up just fussy cutting him close to the line. I take these watercolor markers from Artist Lofts and I pick the black marker and I color just around the edges to hide any imperfections. And then I select some Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper. And I really like Strathmore because it is perfect for ink blending. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So I just cut down the paper to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then eventually I come back and I cut it down a little bit more, and after ink blending it, you'll see I'll cut it down a little bit more. And I didn't have any plans for this card. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just kind of went with it, so to speak. So here I'm placing the snowman in right where I want him to be on the card. And then I realized it didn't look right, and so I needed to cut it down some more. And this just kind of, when you make so many cards the same size, you end up realizing what an A2 size card should look like, give or take. And that's kind of what happened there. I realized that it wasn't the right size, so I cut it down. Here I'm showing off that I'm going to do a technique that involves taping and ink blending, because I wanted to ink blend some stripes onto my paper. I line up the top of my card with the 60-degree line on my mat. I'm using the We Are Memory Keepers tempered glass mat. I know a lot of people use the Tim Holtz mixed media tempered glass mat, but in all reality, it is all the same thing. And honestly, I don't look to buy that mat, not because of any other reason other than my mat works just fine. So I skipped ahead because watching me tape the whole thing is kind of boring. There was no method to my madness. I just taped, I eyeballed it, taped straight across to hold down the paper using washi tape. I didn't have to take off any stickiness or anything. So I'm using Distress Ink colors, and I pulled out the shaded lilac, but I don't actually end up using it. What I did use is Evergreen Bough, and that's what I'm blending with right now. And I create a little bit of a halo around the top of the card using that color. I come back with some Salty Ocean Distress Ink in the middle, and I wanted to create a little bit of a halo of color with the Salty Ocean, kind of like a highlight in the center. And then at the bottom of the card, I finish it off with a little bit of Seedless Preserves. And when I started blending the Seedless Preserves up back into the Evergreen Bough, it created a really muddy look. So I didn't like that, and then I came back in with more of the Salty Ocean to blend away the purple. So what I was showing earlier with my blending sponge is a lot of people wonder, and I only know this because I watch other YouTubers, they answer a lot of questions about the blending sponges. I have 2 different brands of blending sponges, and honestly, I like the Tim Holtz one a little bit better. But when I rip the blending sponges off of my blending tool, they tend to pucker and start to roll up on themselves. So I was just showing, here I'm showing how I remove them. I grab the black piece and I rip it off with a sponge. So, excuse me. Yeah, blending sponges, when they get a lot of use, they tend to pucker, and that's perfectly normal. That's probably just a sign that it's time to replace them soon. So I started ripping off the tape, and then I realized I should probably clean off the washi tape before I pull any more off. I am very notorious for being so messy. And so any opportunity that I can remember to clean up after myself before messing up my project, I definitely jump on that. So I just wanted to make sure I wiped off my surface, wiped off the tape before I got ink everywhere. And then you saw me put the snowman back on my paper. That salty ocean in the middle of the paper is exactly where I want him. And I tried to pick colors that coordinated with the colors I used in the snowman. And so you'll see me put him back and kind of test his placement here and there. So this is where I realized I didn't want my card to be that tall. So I shaved off a little bit off the top and bottom. And here I am picking paper from the Lawn Fawn Knit Picky paper pack. It's kind of like their Christmassy sweater themed paper if you are not familiar with it. So I cut it down to 4¼ by 5½. And then later on, you'll see me actually pick a different paper pack. Excuse me, sorry. You'll actually see me pick a different pattern paper. Why can't I speak today? So here's what happened. This pattern paper that I picked, I ended up getting distracted. The baby started crying on the baby monitor, and I inadvertently put glue on the wrong side of my pattern paper. And I glued my project to it, and there was no recuperating it. So I just decided to scrap it and start new. Well, pick a different pattern paper. And you know what? I liked the other pattern paper better. So I decided I wanted the lined paper, or the ink blended one, to stand out a little bit more on its own. And I grabbed a solid navy blue cardstock from a sampler pack from Simon Says Stamp. And I used that to mat my ink blended paper. And I think it adds a nice touch. It's kind of a nice wintry look. And also earlier I pointed to my tape runner. I use 2 different types of tape runner, and right now I'm using the Xyron Mega Runner. I know a lot of people use the ATG gun. I was not in the market for such an expensive tool at the time when I bought that, so I like the Mega Runner. It's a dot adhesive, so I don't have much of a problem with it, other than it's just kind of bulky in my hand. And here's where I picked the different pattern paper. And you know what? I like this one a little bit better, to be honest. And not just because I messed up my project. So I go ahead and adhere these 2 pieces together. And then I was just measuring it to make sure it actually came out to 4¼ by 5½. I wanted it to be a standard A2 sized card. And this is just the card panel. I'm not actually making the full card in this video, although I don't know that I would do anything intricate on the inside of the card. This is the stamp set that I used, and this is from a Simon Says Stamp card kit from last year, 2018. And this is the only stamp set I used in the entire panel, which is pretty rare for me. I usually bring in like stamps from everywhere. But I decided that it was looking a little bit plain with just the snowman. And I had never used this igloo stamp in this set. And I thought it'd be kind of cute to have like a little ghost looking igloo in the background. I didn't want to draw too much attention to the igloo, so I just stamped it with Versamark clear embossing ink. And I had to do the heat embossing off camera because I was so far away from the plug that I couldn't go back and film that part. But I just heat embossed it using white heat embossing powder. And so I'm just showing what I used to clean off my stamps. and I use the Tim Holtz stamp cleaner. It's a spray. It comes in a bottle. I spray it on a microfiber cloth and rub my stamps clean. For the most part, it works. If I'm really dedicated, I will get into the grooves of the stamp, but I really wasn't that interested in being so detailed. And I stamped the sentiment using Versafine Onyx Black ink. I used that ink because I thought I was going to clear heat emboss the sentiment, and at the last second I decided no, I didn't want to do that. I had already spent too much time on this project. And so I backed the sentiment with the same cardstock that I backed the blended panel. And then I just grabbed an alcohol marker and marked where I needed to make cuts. And yeah, that's where it's going to go. And so every step of the way, you'll see me place my pieces down on the card panel. And I do this just to it's my own way of doing like a checks and balances. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track, that I'm actually placing the images, sizing everything the way that I want it to be sized. And so I go in with some Salty Ocean. I don't know why I kept the shaded lilac on my desk, to be honest. So if it's bothering you, I'm sorry. I thought I was going to use it. I really wanted to. I had the best intentions. So I stamped a couple of different snowflakes. Excuse me. I think I used like 2 different sizes of snowflakes. And then I used the smaller size of the small circles. I think the circles are supposed to be snowballs. And I just stamped kind of in a diagonal, like a messy diagonal, I guess. I wanted it to go in the opposite direction as my stripes, but I wanted it to look a little bit messy. And so this card is very, very beginner friendly. One thing I forgot to mention, when I was ink blending, I went in with a really heavy hand. You don't have to go in with a light hand when you're doing this technique, although if that's the look that you want, obviously don't press down so hard. But I wanted to show that this is a very beginner friendly card. And so now that I have everything in place, roughly where I want it, I bring this stamp to show off that you can add a little heart. There's a heart in the stamp set, and I thought about stamping like a little red heart in the corner there, but in the end I decided not to. I just kind of like the look of the card as it was. And so now I'm going to go in and adhere down my sentiment strip, and after that I'm going to glue the snowman on top of the sentiment strip. And I end up skipping the part where I add glue to the snowman. It was just redundant. You know how to add glue. I don't need to show anybody how I obsessively add glue to my objects. So yeah, I press it down, and I didn't want to put my fingers on the sentiment. It was still wet by this point. There's a little piece off the side there that was hanging off because I realized I glued it on the panel a little bit too far to the right. And so I cut out the part where I added glue to the snowman. Like I said, I went crazy daisy on adding glue. I didn't want him to flop off or peel up or anything. Then I took my B60 Copic sketch marker. You don't have to do this. This is just an added step that's completely unnecessary. If you wanted to add shading but you don't have Copic markers, what you can do is take a graphite pencil and gently, very lightly sketch a shadow underneath the snowman. If you have colored pencils, you could do it with your lightest blue or your gray. But again, the shading is not necessary. And there you have it, my card panel using the snowman that I colored on camera last video. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure, and stay tuned for the next video. Talk to you soon.